Today's episode has been filmed and recorded, so if you are listening to this episode, kindly refer to the description for the YouTube link. And if you are watching today's episode on YouTube, kindly refer to the description for the podcast link for Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Every little bit helps. Thank you and enjoy today's episode. Here we are at Trobe University's Albury-Wodonga campus, right in my backyard. This week, I interview a seasonal lecturer for La Trobe. It is a gentleman who believes that your education can translate into anything. Having come from India and studying economics with a passion for photography and marketing, his education translated beyond the horizon of what business actually is. So today, without any further ado, my guest this week is Abby Shrivastava. My name is Llewellyn, and you are listening to Finding Borders. Roll intro. Season 2, Episode 7. We were spitballing here for a little bit now about our time at La Trobe. I saw you wrote an article here for the La Trobe Accelerator program. Could you tell me a little bit more about that and what it was about in 2019?
Yep. So the Trobe Accelerator program is it's currently going and calls now it's called the La Trobe Innovation on Entrepreneurship, if I'm not wrong. So La Trobe Accelerator program was a startup program that was intended to help specifically regional businesses in the areas that La Trobe have campuses on, and help those businesses accelerate and get their ideas correct. So we started off that program as a support program where you give them bring startups in, give them, training that is part of the pedagogy that we usually follow with accelerators. And, you'll see a lot of the terminologies in that context. And I'm not sure if you've done an entrepreneurship subject in La Trobe or not. If you haven't, you'll come across these terminologies when you get to that. So the idea is to give the startups the right information, get them connected to the right networks, and get them a bit of funding and support and resources that they might need to kickstart their process. So again, trying to help anyone in the early to mid sort of maturity range to get them on board. And a big focus of that was our regional communities and our regional businesses. And that was our USP, let's call it, because we were probably quite late in the game. The Trobe was it was quite late because I think Melbourne had already started, and Melbourne Accelerator is probably one of the country's fantastic and well-renowned accelerator programs, followed by University of Adelaide and Sydney and other universities. So what we figured out that our advantage was that we had access to regional businesses, and no one was doing as much as a university, of course, because of our placement. Not a lot of universities working with regional businesses, so that's how we placed it, and it's still running. And I know in 2020 that was the end of my contract working with Launchwick. So we were funded one part by Launchwick and three parts by La Trobe. So again, 1 million, we got a 1 million grant from Launchwick, and then La Trobe committed to about 3 million to support this over 2 years. And then in 2020, we got a grant from the Commonwealth, and we created the Global Accelerator Program. And the idea for that was, again, to help a mix of all businesses from across, Victoria including our regional businesses to help them connect with international partners. So we had Singtel, we had Scala, we had IMAC from, I think, Belgium. I think there was another partner from I think Australia as well, and maybe another partner from India, which later joined in after my contract was over. So yeah, that's what the accelerator program does, and currently it's called innovation and entrepreneurship because it has grown from there. We have partnered with a lot of organizations ever since, and yeah, that's what the accelerator program is.
Well, in this program, did you see any similarities in some of the businesses that would come to you or that you would guide for help? Like were there lots of, I don't know, little regional cafes that wanted to open, maybe some disability work? Like, was there an actual trend you could establish in the businesses that needed this support?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question. It's quite interesting because, all right, I'll start at the beginning so that we can finish at the end, right?
Yeah.
The beginning was when we started off, we wanted to help anyone and everyone that we could. And again, this is my time. Before that, because we were giving out money and we were limited to the funds, we had the cap for 10 to 12 startups. Later on, when we kind of saw that, what, more than the money, I think the resources are important. What if we can help you build a website for free? What if we can get you access to, let's just say, some LinkedIn credits for free? I'm just saying, right?
Yeah.
That would be a better, because that's what you're spending your money on, and then you can have a bit of the money, actual cash, to do whatever you want to. So when we changed that model, and we did a few studies here and there to look at what's happening and what's more important, and within the cohort, I was keeping a track of how people are, what they want. We figured out we can open up the pool, and in that, I think the first instance, this was the third cohort where we had about, probably, again, I'm forgetting at the top of my head, around 20 odd startups. And we thought, what we could do, we can divide them into groups in terms of their maturity. So we had 5 really mature ones who've gone through the process, have had their own income, then some in the middle, middle sort of range, where they're still trying to gauge, their customer base, and then of course the early startups. I think in terms of the trend, we did see a lot of tech and tech businesses. And when I say tech businesses, uh, again, not just thinking of anything that is coding or building anything tech, like, someone coming and saying, what, I figured out a new process of making, I figured out a technology that helps me make products that are more natural, or I have figured out some way of, satellite imaging using, unused satellites. I'm just saying, that kind of tech. That was the majority of it. And the next part was mostly looking into sales. And when I say sales, again, a mixed bag of, from things like consulting business, things like, food and catering sort of things. So again, a mixed bag of all of that. But I would say predominantly technology. And I think this has to do with the great trend of startups, as you would, as we all kind of know. And again, this is loosely basing it off the local element that, Silicon Valley, right?
Yes.
Everything and anything that is starting off. And again, it's I think it's overrated to what Silicon Valley is. But I think that's where things have started, and people tried doing things and use different innovative concepts to build things up. And that's what we saw. And later on, I think in cohort 4, I believe that's where we kind of broke the entire cohort into streams. So there was, like, we had cap for each stream. So we will get about 7 for each or 8 for each. I'm not sure, but the numbers range from 5 to 8, I guess. So we had tech, we had food, we had, I think, food and sales or something. We had sustainability. We had one other element. I forgot. I mean, again, it's been a while. So we had about 4 or 5 streams, and in that way, we thought, what, we're going to make sure that we are giving enough importance and we have got tailored resources for each of the streams. In terms of now going into another dissection, where there's always these things, and of between how many regional businesses joined in and how many metropolitan businesses joined in. So we always had roughly anywhere from 40 to 50%. So our cap was always 50%, and we always tried our best to get as many from across, as equitable distribution across all our campuses. But again, it doesn't happen, right? And this is again ties back to the innovation and the tech component. It's fantastic because if you look at the businesses across our campuses, it's fantastic. Bendigo is known for innovation, right? Technology and innovation, right? Yes. Albury Wodonga, logistics, food. I think that's the primary thing. Like you'll see a lot of companies doing logistics and transport. You'll see a lot of them in car sales. You'll see a lot of businesses in sustainable fashion, and even sales like natural products. I mean, I remember there's one business that were making syrups out of natural products. Again, those kind of things we saw from Albury Wodonga. Shepparton, very agri innovation sort of space, but also quite heavily in community side of businesses, right? And specifically, I think they have got the Goulburn Valley Malaysian Association. I could be wrong, but that was Shepparton, and Mildura again quite agri focused. So that's the kind of thing that we figured out, and we thought, what? How do we create these streams to make sure that everyone's getting the right resources? Yes. So in because of that, of course, the majority of the businesses came from Bendigo, just because of the flavor of things being technology and that side of things. But having said that, towards the end, we saw a greater participation from our other campuses. And we thought, whatever we are doing, the message is getting through. That now we see more and more applications. So just to give you a bit of a benchmark, I think the first time the cohort ran, we had about 50 odd applications or 40 odd applications. And the second time the cohort ran, it was about 80, and then it went on to 160 or something.
Wow.
And then 170 sort of. So it was quite fantastic. I mean, we made some move in there.
Yeah, just doubled year on year.
Yeah, doubled, yes, which was good. And then I was just saying before, it was a massive experience, because usually when we are in our metropolitan areas, we are in a sort of a cocoon, and when you get out of it, that's where you figure out that metropolitan, fantastic, you've got all the resources there, but I think the aspect of community is far stronger in our regional areas, and that's what we thought was our massive advantage. Like, how do whatever we do there, we will see a better engagement and better return on the help that they're receiving, because you could see them accelerate real fast.
Yes.
And that was the overall kind of, I think, the goal. And hopefully, again, I would like to think that we achieved it. And for that, we did receive the AFR award for community engagement in 2018. So that was fantastic.
Yes. And well, moving away from La Trobe for just a split second, and with still staying on the topic of community and involvement, I read about some organization you are a member of and that you found as well. It's called Teens for Tigers. Is that
correct?
So what exactly can you tell me about Teens for Tigers and what it stands for, what it was about, or still is about, maybe, if it's...
So Teens for Tigers it's interesting. So my background, I think early on in my career, I started off as a sort of a photojournalist, let's call it that, right? Okay. I mean, of course, on technicality, that's what it would be.
Yes.
Because I love photography, and that was a good hobby. I wouldn't call it a profession now, but at the time that was paying me, so it was a profession. So I think probably let's just take a step back. The good thing about the entire photography thing was I was okay at writing, right? And this is where it all started. I thought, I can take a picture and I can write. Fantastic. What's the profession that I can do it? And then it was photojournalism, right? And then while we were doing that, while I was trying to figure out what should be my first job, and that was my first job, I had, and I still have a great deal of passion for, um, environmental conservation and,
Mm.
all of that. So in that, I was quite interested in wildlife photography. So I remember every summers, and that this was in India, scorching heat, Jesus. Um, Probably off topic. So it used to go into these forests and take pictures and then come back and do nothing off it. If it was an assignment from a magazine or a newspaper, you'll go and write and you publish the picture, and the rest of the pictures are yours. You keep the copyright to it. And at the time, I had a few friends who joined in, and when I say friends, it's like family friends. Their parents said, "Oh, you're going there? Why don't you let's just go there?" And
Yes.
we we started, and more and more of these friends joined in. And we kind of thought, you know what? How do we teach young people, millennials, uh, the importance of conservation and importance of wildlife, and how do we wildlife should not be, you are gearing up in your fancy gears, getting a fancy Mercedes, you hop on, you go on a safari, come back and brag about your friends on Instagram. It has to be more than that, right?
Okay.
And yet you have the tool, which is your social media, which you still want to brag about. How do we match that up? Right? So this was a business model. It's a few of our friends. We thought, you know what? People want to go to wildlife because I'll talk about again. I'll probably divert, from a bit there. Like for an example, if you have to go on a safari, let's just say in South Africa, for an example, right? That is expensive. That is not cheap. You are probably looking at about $25,000 worth of, it's the investment, and probably a 20,000 per person sort of investment. How do we? And then people are happy to spend it. And if you're happy to spend it, how do we make it more educational? Right? It shouldn't be like you're hopping onto a safari, just going and seeing a few animals and coming in, saying, "Oh, we saw a lion, or we saw a cheetah." It has to be
Yeah.
more than that. So we thought, why don't we teach these people how to do photography? So we started conducting photography classes.
All right.
And while we were doing those classes, we had someone talk about ecological. So basically, it was taught through the lens of ecological conservation and wildlife.
Mm.
So, and we kind of focused on a few things. This was history, culture, and conservation. So those three elements were prime. And what we did was we started off like a band of people.
Yes.
Of course, you need investment. So, as the greatest of fashion goes, you chip in your pocket money and you beg your family to
Yeah.
to kind of you convince them to invest whatever. And it was a small investment, not a huge one. Looking at about a few $100s to begin with, not a huge. And I think the major thing went into buying the gears and stuff for the other people. So that's how it started. And then we thought, you know what? When all of these people come back from the photography trip, I mean, fantastic, they've done social media, whatever.
Yes.
Let's look at the pictures because, of course, the idea was for them to write and click pictures. How about get some of their best pictures and combine it and do a yearly calendar?
Mm.
And that's how we started off as a gig. And what we would do with that calendar was each of these people went to the school, sell the calendars, get the money back, and
Yeah.
that money was used for the next thing. So there was no profit. It was a not-for-profit thing.
Sort of reinvested back into the
That's it.
initiative. Yes.
That's it. And not even that. Like, for an example, if I were the person went on a trip and I sold, let's just say 2,000 calendars, right?
Yeah.
So whatever, like there was a thing like 50% of that goes back into the initiative so that we can fuel the next trip. So what we used to do was, as compared to a fully um, charged premium trip, we invested some of our money and our resources and of course a connect to make it cheaper for the same sort of a trip that you would pay for as a premium. So this was the money that came in to make sure that the next installment was, kind of funded by the organization. So we're not begging others and saying, "Hey, can we get a discount?" Right?
Yes.
So that was the intent, and we did run for a few years. And of course, see, I'm not taking. I mean, not as a group of people who started, not taking the entire credit because there were a few other senior members, journalists, and and conservators who were there as mentors and who actually guided us through that process.
Right.
So we did had a good run for a few years. We collaborated with WWF for a project. I think this was for a couple of trips, and then I think this was in 2016. Towards the end, one of the main mentors, he passed away, and because he was sort of the person doing, guiding us through the process and stuff, I think once he passed, I think the group kind of went away because everyone was in that phase of their career. They were trying to do
Yeah.
something for their own. But what remained of that? So unofficially, I mean, if you go and search, the website and all is still there, and it still functions in some capacity with whosoever wants to kind of take it. So it was, again, the ownership was not quite constricted, right? So we still have a few people in there, who learn photography, who still do the deed, and do all of that. But I think that was pretty much where the main kind of members went away, and that was interesting because we didn't have a full closure to it. But the good side is that we were able to train, or at least give the exposure to, I think, more than 25, 30 young people, and including ourselves, because we were young at the time.
Of course.
Not so much. Yeah, so that was Tease the Tigers, and yeah, and I know a few of them have taken up photography as a career,
Okay.
which is good. It is good to see, and yeah, and hopefully they're going to do some really good things in the future.
Well, I was watching, this is 2-3 years ago now,
Yeah,
I was watching, it's like a 30-minute documentary on
yeah,
Netflix. I don't even know how I stumbled upon it, but it is called Period, End of Sentence. So what it is about, and it's
yeah,
in rural India. So
yeah,
what it's about is this small group of people is led by a man who had this machine that would essentially press cotton buds into sanitational pads for women.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so I thought to myself, okay, it's just another competitor in the market, or it's just another entrepreneur trying to make a difference. What was interesting that I was completely blown away by is, once young women in India who can't afford these sanitational products get to the age of menstruation, they become quite embarrassed by it. It is a taboo topic in some of the schools that they at least showed in this documentary. Like, so they would essentially drop out of school, and they would a lot of them seem to become very dependent of their man, which is what a lot of them did not want. They wanted to be independent. One of the women who were in this initiative was quite firm that she did not want to be dependent on a man. She wanted to be a police officer and have lots of money, that she made herself. So I thought it was interesting to see that they started this initiative with maybe 3 other women. And as they were making these sanitational pads, they were not only more affordable than the bigger brands like Kotex, but they were also higher quality. And they would get these women who would sell them in the villages to actually, that the customers would say, if you have work, we'd love to sell with you. Like, we'd love to also make some money out of this and get some satisfaction for our time. So I just thought that something so simple as a piece of cotton actually affects someone's entire life, their education, the outcome. It blew my mind. It was something so simple. It's only 30 minutes. I honestly, you being from India, I take it as well. Like it would, I think it would just, be staggering.
I think this is a really good comment that you've made, Llewellyn, because I mean, we always say that the necessity is the mother of all invention, and I guess call it wherever, like, especially coming from India, and again, it's a developing nation, and when we say developing nation, we always come up with a sort of a negative connotation. It's
Yeah.
developing, but let's look at the positive. It is developing means that it has opportunity to overcome and answer a lot of the questions that are still to be answered. For an example, as to what you mentioned, and there's I think in that context, there is a commercial motion picture that has been made on this, and of course, as the greatest of trends go, usually, when there's a commercial picture or motion picture, you go and look at it, and you go and search it out, and then that's how things get started. And yeah, absolutely, it's true that this person, again, I'm forgetting his name. Yeah, it was in his home. He was seeing his sister and his wife, and things happening around. And he figured out, how do we make this thing happen? I mean, it's just a piece of cloth, and where does the cloth comes from? It's cotton, and he kind of played around with it, and of course, the society kind of gave him a hard time, saying, "Oh, you're not doing the right thing," and this and that. So he had to move places, and then he had help from other people, and then I think he went into, I think, United Nations or somewhere, and he gave this lecture saying, this is what we have done. And I think this is from the motion picture, but again, on the backside of the story, he did all those good things, and the reality is, yes, simplest thing, and you just need to figure out what is the opportunity and what is that you can create. And again, I'll use my theoretical lingo in here: opportunity recognition, discovery versus creation. You figured out, there's the need, and because of whatever was happening, you thought, this is how we can create it, and this is how it was done. So I think, education and understanding of an actual necessity and being able to answer that becomes the initiator for a lot of good things. And I think this is, and then probably, what, I think my initiation into education was probably, I would say, just going back to it, Three Teens for Tigers, because before that, I was working. I wouldn't say working. I was volunteering for another organization that was looking into um, helping underprivileged kids with the learning and teaching, because again, as you would know, in India the poverty is quite high, and a lot of people are still below the poverty line. And in that, a big part of the thing is that young kids do not get access to schools, even though that we have got government schools. But again, remember, it's a country of whatever, 1.5 billion
Yeah.
people. Now, if again, I'm roughly quoting that, but again, around that number. And it's a small country. So if you look at the country, it's one third of Australia, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So there's so many schools to actually cater to that. But what we used to do, this other NGO, is they had their space within their house, yeah.
Was this called, I'm going to butcher this name, Arohan NGO?
Yes, Arahan.
That's
Yes,
okay.
yes. And they do this beautiful thing, right? They used to get people at the basement of their house, and they used to teach them. And the idea was they can teach. And again, you've got different age groups of people coming in at the same level of literacy. So they had to accelerate them to a point that they can actually sit for their, VCE, let's just call it,
Yeah.
equivalent in there. So we have got, your 10th standard and the 12th standard. So 12th is your VCE and 10th is like a mini VCE,
Yeah.
right? So they used to teach the skills that would take about 6 years to teach within, I think, 3 years. That was an accelerated coursework, get them to that point, and get them to take those certificates, help them to go through college. And they started seeing the results quite fast. And then, no, when I say quite fast, I mean when I joined.
Yeah.
Again, at that time, they had to do a lot of work, and they had been working, years before I even kind of knew about them. And then they went on, got a new school, and again, this was already a public school in there. So they said, you know what, this during the evening time, no one comes in. Can we use the school for teaching during the evening time?
Yes.
And of course, being a government school, they got access to it. And they were, I think, I think in a single batch, they were teaching about good 500 students, something. And yeah, that was again, I think that from there, I particularly saw the need for education. And again, when you are in your 16 and 18 years of age, I mean, your brain's working differently, right?
Yeah.
And at the time, we thought, oh, you know what? How do we convert that into photography? Because at the time, you stuck, you didn't have much of perspective. And we did that, and by the time we were quite, not quite old, but at least somewhat old. And then we thought, all right, what is that we can do next? And probably again for me, I saw that when I started working for an advertising firm that you need to help train new recruits and be empathetic about it. So again, I think, at somewhere early on, you get that stage and you go and think, oh, you know what, this is something that you want to do. I think, what the situation, that changes, but I guess the act remains somewhat there.
Yes.
So yeah.
Well, I also see, so you did an economics degree in Delhi as well. So you
Yeah.
obviously thought your own education was as important as water and food, like that opened all sorts of doors for you, I imagine.
I think it's quite interesting. My education is quite interesting, and I truly believe that it is absolutely important. What you study does help in making you understand or um, do whatever you're doing far better. And doesn't have to be exact translation. For an example, I'm not an economist, right?
Yes.
And my degree was, so again, I had two majors. It was, economics and English literature. And I took on my main area was English literature because I wanted to learn it. Right. Again, I remember I said I loved writing. Right.
Yes.
And I thought, how can I make it better? And the only way you can make it better is knowing more of how it has developed to the point that you are currently writing it. Just
Okay.
going back and reading about the greats, right? At this point in time, I mean, if I have to compare them again, I'm far off from what I had read or what I'm still reading about different people, right? But it gives you a gauge of how and what to do, right? And then the other part was, given that I was in that area, I thought, you know what, it's important to know how you understand how the economy functions, you know what is happening, but how does it actually happen? It always kind of is an interesting thing, right? To understand and know that. And then hence I thought, let's just take economics and see what comes out of it. I never had the intention of being an, economist. But that was it. And then from there, kind of had some training as to what, whatever I was doing, at least I had some understanding. And once you are in that process, you kind of start figuring out what you want to do and how you want to do. So again, I had some leadership positions where some of those trainings came in quite handy. That led to the other thing where I thought, you know what, I was at a point where I had the opportunity to lead for a while, and I thought, you know what, I do not have the skills to lead an organization.
Okay.
And when I say skills, because it takes time and it takes experience to do it. And when you're leading, it's not just about balancing resources, right? That's one part of it, but I think a lot of cognitive elements, a lot of behavioral elements go into those things, and that need proper training. And that what led to my master's. And from there, like once you're in the cycle, you're like, you know what, I want to know more about this. That led to my research, and then now to my PhD.
Yes. And then do you think that, speaking to myself as a university student, and as anyone who wants to go out in the big world after they get their degree, do you think that once you do have your degree and you're sure it's what you've always wanted to do with your life, or it seemed like the best pathway to go, do you then think that it's perfectly natural for you to not pursue the degree you just spent 3 or 4 years studying? Like, you were studying economy and you're not an economist, you just wanted to understand how it worked. Well, someone else wanted to be a nurse, for instance, and then she or he starts working in the field, and it's medicine still interests them, but they don't want to be a nurse. They'd rather be a pharmacist or someone else on the sideline. Like, is that okay? Because it's
absolutely.
like it's a gold medal syndrome you get at the end. Like, what do I do now?
I think it's quite an interesting thing. So again, I'm not sure. Again, I'm not sure where and how it started off. I mean, when you start reading about education, and I always believe that the prehistoric, let's just call it, the education system was trying, or at least was just because, how things were changing back in the days, the jobs were coming, we needed more people to do the jobs. I think that's where the education kind of tilted from where the education, actually, what it means. We started making, nut bolts where, for certain things, like if you want to be an accountant, get an accountant degree and you'll become an accountant.
Yes.
Right. That's the intent. Or you want to be a financial investor, do a master's degree in finance and you probably do it. That's a good requirement. I'm not saying that's the bad requirement, but having said that, what if you do a finance degree, but you don't want to be an investor and you want to have your own business? Does that mean you wasted your money? Probably not, because it's education. It's not get a job. Education is learning what you want to learn. And that learning should tell you if this is meant for you or not. And if this isn't meant, it doesn't mean that you would not remember what you've learned. It's going to come handy at some point in time. You start your own business, you would know where the investments are going to come from, because it doesn't matter. You take it, you learn fine arts. You might think, fine arts, now I'm doing a business in something else. How does it help? Well, it helps with aesthetics. Yes. You probably, whatever you're doing, you have got the eye for aesthetics. Everything is translatable. I think that's the important thing. You learn those hard skills. What you do with it, it's up to you. And that's education. Education for me is learning something because it interests you. Job is something that you really want to do. How that translation works, it's quite interesting. It may or may not work, but I want to believe, or at least for me, I have always seen that it works out in one way or the other. It doesn't matter, like, when later in that time, when I was doing digital marketing, and the time we were creating content, right?
Yes.
I mean, if someone might say, you have done English literature, you meant to write literary work, and you were writing digital marketing stuff, which is flowery language in the terms that we call it. Yes, it is flowery language, but grammatically is correct. Yes. And I know it's grammatically correct because that's what my education has taught me. If I'm making a statement and it's a technical statement, the economics degree tells me to check for facts, to check if there is some sort of, outlier that you're accounting for, there's some sort of backup or, some theoretical explanation to what you're trying to explain. Yes. It's translatable. So again, it goes for any or every person. I mean, I was trying to help, I would kind of mentor a student, a graduate student, and I remember she telling me that, I want to do public relations, but I don't want to go to this other university and study. What should I do? And I said to her, the time was, no, she was like, I don't want to go to the other university, but rather I would want to stick with this particular university, and can I just change my degree to fine arts, and just because I love it? And I said, see, it doesn't matter like what degree. I think the main question you need to ask is what at this point in time you want to learn. Don't change just because there's certain jobs or what. I mean, it's good to have that in mind. So don't get me wrong. It's not a linear process, right? No. It has got a lot of factors. I'll always say be strategic. If you want a certain job, look at how it is changing. Look at what the requirements are. Look at what you need to get to that point, and make sure that you get all that. But in terms of education, always be mindful that if you are chasing an outcome out of it, then you're probably missing out on the education. I mean, don't keep that in mind, not just saying that, keep that in mind, have that in perspective, but focus on the education. Marks are important, but I have seen many people getting 98% out of the university and not getting a job as compared to someone, getting 70% and having a job. Again, I know the outcome that I'm talking about here is, again, it's quite exchange related that, you get a job or not. But I think the main important thing is, have you learned? That's the most important thing. Have you learned something?
Well, how do you translate what you've learned in economics into marketing then?
They go hand in hand. I mean, you've asked a very controversial question there.
I think so.
It is quite controversial because there's a long going debate whether marketing is part of operations or is it a part of sales.
Okay.
And I like to believe it's a part of it in its own right because it helps translate operation into sales.
Mm-hmm.
But I've heard a lot of arguments as to which side it takes, and I would not tell which side it takes. I would keep it to the point that it is in its own right, and economics is a massive part of it because unless it's marketing is science, right? It's
Yes.
it's part science. When I say science, I'm talking about mathematical science and part psychology. It's basically understanding the human side of things, and that's how. I mean, my master's research was looking into consumer behavior, so I was always quite interested in how consumer behavior kind of shapes and what are the different elements. And I believe, understanding the mechanisms of how market change, and that's what economics teaches you, right? How is market changing? What are the different elements that are changing a certain element in the market? Understanding that and understanding what ticks humans is what leads to marketing.
Yes.
That marketing is the outcome. You're trying to balance the science side of economics and your human side, and you're trying to create something that is convincing them. And that's what it is. And I would also kind of add another lens to it, which is public relations, right? Because my role has been around marketing and public relations throughout my career, more so on the creator sides when it comes to advertising, but also on the public relations side. It's when the marketing has created all the elements, the person side comes to actually going and talking to people and trying to explain to them this is why this is happening. So I think there's a lot of those elements, and the answer is anything and everything that you learn is going to be useful in your life.
Yes, I think so. Well, I mean, it's like you said, it's what gets people ticking. But the argument of it being part of operations or sales, I've never heard that one before, because you could theoretically argue both, hence the controversy. I
It
do.
is.
Well, as a final question, and we're on the topic of education still,
Yeah.
what piece of advice then would you give to any university student in your position when you were one? Like, what's the one thing you would have wanted to hear someone say to you when you were at university? What would you say to anyone listening to this?
This is a beautiful question, and my universe, and actually, this is interesting and important. Everyone has, when they are going to the university, everyone has their own idea of what the university is going to offer. And again, not to generalize, I would suggest most people, and again, this is, I don't know why, right? Again, there are many factors why. When people come to the university, they have got an outcome in mind.
Okay.
I will do this, I'll get this so that I can get this, right? It's very linear, this, and this,
Yes.
which isn't quite true. And as we have discussed, right, you might do something and you end up doing something else. That is the highest likelihood of what's going to happen. And especially, I would say for millennials, this is going to be the reality. Again, it's not going to be like, my father staying in two jobs, 15 years, 20 years, and, retiring and being quite contented. We as millennials or in that age group, we are going to change jobs. Probably 5 to 10 years, we're going to change jobs. And that's the reality of the economy. Having said, I mean, one of the things I would recommend is figuring out why you are learning what you're learning. I think that is the most important thing because, see, that helps. That's a good starting point because that helps you in choosing the right learning element. Not just, I don't know, like, see, I've been guilty of it. High school, again, 10 standard, right? 10 standard is the time in India where you pick art, science, or business. Actually, it was called what is commerce? That's what it was called. Okay. 3 streams, and depending on how much you get, you can select a stream. So if you get 80 and above, you can select science. If you get 70 and above, you can select commerce. Anything below that goes into arts, right? That's kind of segregation.
Wow. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then different schools would have different cutoffs. For an example, if you had 85 and above, then this school is going to offer you science. So every school had their own cutoff, right? So I remember the school that I studied in from I think grade zero, call it transition nursery, the different terminology. I mean, I wanted to be in the same school because all my friends were going in there. And I think I got 80% in my 10th standard, and the school's cutoff was, I think, 82%, 85%.
Yeah.
So, well, I went to another school, which was, which was fantastic. And I stayed there for about a week. And I was, of course, having FOMO. I was like, oh, Jesus, I want to go back. All my friends are there.
Yeah.
So I remember, writing to the principal saying, I'm going to be a really good student. I'm going to get really good marks. Please consider me. And by some luck or whatever, they had the second. I was on the waiting list, and the second list came off, and I was considered. And then I didn't do quite well in my 12th standard. I mean, I was an average student, and this is because, of course, I was in a zone where I was quite comfortable. I didn't quite think why I was doing what I was doing. And in retrospect, if I look back, I think if I had only thought of what I wanted to do and maybe chosen the other school, the outcome would have been probably different. I don't know if better, but maybe different. So I think the most important thing is to understand what you're studying and why you're studying it. The second thing is university is not just about classes. It's not just about coming and hanging out with friends and having a good time. Yes, that is important. Do that. That's one big part of the university now. It's a big part of your development. The most important thing is finding people who can really help you. And university, I tell you, anyone who's working at the university, anyone is a perennial learner and a perennial teacher, whatever. And I think in that, find someone who can genuinely help you with your learning process. Like I have found really good mentors, right? And I never had to ask them. They gave me time, and I really don't know why they gave me time, like an international student trying to figure something out, right? And there was someone, and I asked questions, and they genuinely took interest. And till date, there may be months I don't ask them or write to them, but they're going to check in and say, "Hey, Abby, are you doing all right?" And I'm talking within Latrobe. Like I found at least I would three people, three really important people who have helped me with this entire process. Find people who help you, to mentor you and help you. And third thing, which is really important, is network. Please network.
Okay.
In a university of whatever, 3,000, 10,000 people, network, because, and you would have seen it, again, I'm blaming it on COVID, right? On a Zoom screen, 60 people, all blacked out.
Yeah.
The moment you open up the breakout room, 20%, 30% vanish, right? People do not collaborate. And I see that's okay, understandable. Take this opportunity, because remember, when you graduate, whenever you are in your life, this is the cohort that has gone through the process. This is the cohort who's going to be around you. I mean, we'll be gone, right? We'll be gone. Maybe there's some of, again, but again, that's your main help system is going to be these people. So network, doesn't matter at which stream, network, make friends, network, and that's going to be really important. So 3 things: know what you're going to learn and why you're learning it, find people who can genuinely help, mentors, and network. Very important. If you do it correctly, you have utilized the university. Otherwise, what's the difference from learning online and paying top dollars to come to university? Make the most of it.
Well, 3 for the price of 1. That's a good marketing ploy, I think.
That's it. I mean, we don't realize. I mean, that's what I realized really, really down the lane when I was doing my master's, and this was a learning experience, because I really thought that if I write to someone and ask them for 15 minutes of their time, I'm very sure people wouldn't say no to. I mean, they would not say no to it, right? They would definitely say yes, and it works. I've tried it, and people always are happy to come and get a cup of coffee, 15 minutes. And if you look at the if you do a cost benefit analysis, $4 or $3 for 15 minutes of a time for a person who's quite busy, it's a fantastic outcome. And you make a friend.
Oh, that's it. That's exactly
That's
right.
it. That's it. To make the most of it. Make the most of it, especially coming out of 2022 when hopefully, fingers crossed, we go
Yes.
back to the campus with proper restrictions and following all that we can. Make friends, understand what you're doing, and get yourself a good mentor, people who genuinely can help you.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you for your time, Abby. This has been a great interview. It's very insightful. I think there's a lot of things in here that, you know, people might, in my position, might be wondering about, because we're all young and confused and we don't know what's coming next. I really think the more insight we can get them, the better.
Absolutely.
But no, it's been great, and I do, fingers crossed, I do hope we go back to campus, and hopefully we can all make our way back onto the good old classroom system we've come to know and love.
Absolutely, Llewellyn, absolutely. I guess, that's what we are looking forward to and hoping that we are able to, because at the end of the day, that's an important part of learning. That's an important part of development. But again, it's also important to take care of yourself, make sure that we are being good citizens. And hopefully 2022 is more rewarding, more peaceful, and more prosperous for all of us.
We shall see you very shortly.
Absolutely, Llewellyn, absolutely.
All right, but thank you again.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It was lovely talking to you, and yeah, hopefully we get to catch up when all of this ends. Anyways, I was planning to take a trip down Wodonga. I don't know when.
Yes.
That'd be fun. Or if you are in Melbourne here, just give a shout out and we can catch up in here.
Just a 15-minute cup of coffee.
Oh yeah. Oh, probably more.
That sounds good. That sounds very good to me. Detail that one, and you know where to find me.
Absolutely.